The winter night in New York was merciless. Snow fell in heavy sheets that turned the streets into rivers of white silence. The subway entrance at 145th Street had long since been abandoned by commuters, its iron gate rusted and broken the concrete steps covered in slush. Inside the tunnel, a young woman crouched against the wall, her thin coat pulled tight around her small frame. Her name was Anna Carter. At 27, she looked older than her years, her eyes lined from nights without sleep and days without food. Beside her lay a boy no more than 5. Ethan's cheeks were flushed with fever, his breathing shallow and ragged. His small body trembled even under the thin blanket Anna had salvaged from a shelter months ago. She pressed him to her chest, as if her warmth could keep him alive, though her own body was shaking from the cold. Every exhale left a cloud of mist in the air. Anna's lips trembled as she began to hum. It was a lullaby her mother used to sing, words from a childhood that felt like another lifetime. She sang not to put Ethan to sleep, but to hold him back from the edge, to remind him of her voice, to keep him tethered to the world. The tune cracked when she tried to raise her voice, her throat dry and raw from hunger. Still, she kept singing. She brushed a strand of damp hair from his forehead. Ethan's eyelids fluttered, but did not open. His tiny hand lay limp against her chest. Panic surged through her, and she pulled him closer, rocking slightly. "Do not leave me," she whispered, though there was no one to hear but the echo of the wind. For hours she had walked the streets looking for somewhere warm, anywhere with light, and a door that was not locked. Storefronts turned her away, shelters were already full, and police officers told her to move along. The subway tunnel was all she had left. Here at least the snow did not fall directly on them, though the cold still cut through stone and metal. Anna's mind drifted back to the life she once imagined, the art classes she used to take, the apartment she had rented with Hope. It all felt impossible now. Hunger and debt had swallowed that girl. What remained was only a mother trying to keep her son alive. She pressed her cheek to Ethan's head and closed her eyes. The song wavered into silence, and for a moment she believed he had stopped breathing. Her heart clenched until she felt the faint rise of his chest. Relief mixed with despair. How much longer could she hold on? She had no food left, no money, no friends. The world had narrowed to this tunnel, this child, and the sound of the storm above. Anna lifted her head. The ceiling dripped with melted snow. The concrete smelled of rust and damp. A rat scurried across the floor, bold in the emptiness. She ignored it, her whole being focused on Ethan. She touched his face, cold against her fingers. Tears welled in her eyes but froze before they could fall. Tonight might be the end. She knew it in the ache of her bones, in the weakness of her arms, in the hollow of her stomach. Yet she sang again, voice shaking, because if this was the last night for her child, she wanted him to remember love and not silence. Outside, the wind howled down the stairwell like a ghost. The city above kept moving, taxis sliding through snow, skyscrapers glowing with heat and light. Down here, Anna sat alone with her son, clinging to a lullaby and to hope that had almost died. Daniel Whitmore left the glittering ballroom just after midnight, the sound of champagne glasses and polite laughter still echoing faintly in his head as he stepped into the bitter cold of the New York night. He was 32, tall, immaculately dressed in a tuxedo, tailored to perfection, the kind of man people noticed the moment he entered a room. Yet tonight he felt invisible even to himself. The gala had been another showcase of wealth and power, a charity dinner filled with speeches about generosity, but Daniel had left early, suffocated by the hollowness of it all. He had written a 7-figure check to the foundation, but the applause that followed had meant nothing. The city was covered in snow, the kind that silences traffic and forces strangers to huddle together at bus stops. But Daniel sat alone behind the wheel of his black Bentley, the heater on leather seats warm his mind colder than the world outside. He thought about his father, about the empire of steel and finance that was expected to define his life, and about the emptiness that lingered no matter how many skyscrapers bore the family name. As he turned north on Broadway, his eyes caught something strange, a faint flicker of movement by a broken subway entrance, a shadow where no shadow should be. He would have ignored it, as he had ignored so many things, but then a sound pierced the night, faint, cracked, almost drowned by the storm. It was singing. Daniel slowed the car, frowning, rolling down the window just enough to hear. The tune was broken, but it was a lullaby, trembling, fragile, as though it came from someone trying to hold on to life itself. Something in him froze. Memories stirred uninvited of a hospital room long ago, of a mother's soft voice, before it was silenced forever. He pulled the car to the curb engine humming and stepped out into the storm, the snow biting at his polished shoes, the tuxedo no defense against the wind. He crossed the sidewalk and stood at the mouth of the subway stairwell, peering down into the dark. There he saw her. A young woman hunched against the wall, clutching a small child to her chest. Her coat was threadbare, her hair damp and tangled, her eyes wild with exhaustion. The child looked worse, face pale beneath the flush of fever lips tinged blue, breath shallow. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. This was not a scene from his world of crystal chandeliers and private jets. This was survival in its rawest form. The woman's lips moved as she sang, though the sound was barely a whisper now, her body swaying gently to keep the child warm. She looked up suddenly, and their eyes met across the darkness. Fear flashed in hers, sharp and defensive, like an animal cornered. Daniel did not move closer. He simply stood there, tuxedo dusted with snow, a man from another life, staring down into a tunnel that smelled of rust and despair. The contrast was almost surreal, yet he felt a pull he could not explain. The gala, the speeches, the meaningless applause, all of it evaporated. Here was something real, something fragile, something that mattered. He took a careful step down the stairs, his polished shoes slipping slightly on the ice. The woman tensed, clutching the child tighter. The song stopped. Daniel raised a hand, palm open, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "I heard you singing," he said quietly. "I could not just keep driving." The woman's eyes narrowed, her whole body coiled with suspicion. Daniel exhaled his breath, a cloud in the frigid air, and for the first time in years, he felt his own life shift, pulled away from wealth and titles toward a subway tunnel where a mother and child fought against the storm. Anna's arms tightened protectively around Ethan as the stranger stepped closer, his tuxedo and polished shoes so out of place against the cracked concrete and dripping pipes. Her heart pounded in her chest, every instinct screaming danger. Men in suits had never brought her anything but pain debt, collectors, lawyers, social workers threatening to take her son away. She hissed a warning through chattering teeth, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion. "Stay back!" Daniel stopped a few feet away, raising both hands slowly, his voice calm but urgent. "I am not here to hurt you. I swear. I just want to help." His words echoed in the tunnel, swallowed quickly by the storm above. Anna shook her head violently. Help always came with a price. She had learned that the hard way. Her grip on Ethan tightened, her fingers trembling as she tried to shield his tiny frame. Ethan coughed, a raw sound that tore through the silence and bent Anna's resolve. His small body shook, his lips parted in a shallow gasp, and terror gripped her. Daniel saw it too. The boy was fading. He lowered one hand and reached into his coat pocket, moving slowly so she could see. Anna flinched, expecting a weapon, but instead he pulled out a folded scarf. He set it carefully on the step between them. It was thick cashmere, far finer than anything she had ever touched. "Please," he said softly. "He is freezing. At least use this." Anna's eyes darted to the scarf, then back to the man. Her body screamed trap, but Ethan whimpered against her chest, his skin like ice. Her resolve cracked. With a trembling hand, she snatched the scarf and wrapped it around her son, tucking it beneath his chin. The warmth was immediate, and for a moment, Ethan's breathing steadied. Relief surged through her, sharp and painful. She looked back at the man, her suspicions still fierce, but colored now with confusion. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. Daniel hesitated. He could have given his name, his title, the empire attached to it. Instead, he simply said, "Someone who could not walk away." Anna's throat tightened. She wanted to believe, but trust was a luxury long stripped from her. She pressed her cheek to Ethan's damp hair, rocking slightly, as though motion alone could keep him alive. "You cannot take him from me," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Daniel shook his head firmly. "I would never." He stepped no closer, his breath visible in the cold. "I have a car, heat, A doctor. He will not make it through the night out here." Anna's body went rigid. A doctor meant hospital's questions forms the risk of losing her child to a system that did not care if she lived or died. She shook her head violently again. "No hospitals. Never." Daniel studied her for a long moment. His instincts as a businessman told him to negotiate to offer proof, but here in the tunnel logic seemed useless. This was about survival. "Then no hospital," he said quietly. "Just a doctor. Someone I trust. He can see your son before we go anywhere." Anna's breath caught. She wanted to believe, but fear gnawed at her. Every promise in her past had been broken. Still, Ethan's cough deepened, rattling, tearing at her heart. His eyes fluttered half open, glazed and unfocused. Panic overtook her. She looked at the stranger at the tuxedo dusted with snow, at the hands held open in surrender. For a long moment the world seemed to still. Then Ethan gasped weakly, a sound so fragile it shattered her last defense. Anna's lips parted, her voice barely audible. "If you try to take him from me, I will fight you with everything I have." Daniel nodded solemnly. "I would expect nothing less." He extended his hand again, palm open, waiting. Anna hesitated one breath longer, then slowly shifted her weight and reached out. Her fingers touched his, cold against warm. For the first time that night, she allowed hope to enter the tunnel. Daniel did not waste a second once her cold fingers brushed his. He slipped off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over her shoulders before guiding her carefully toward the street. Snow blew sideways across the avenue, stinging her face, but the black Bentley idled at the curb like some impossible chariot out of a dream. Anna froze when she saw it, clutching Ethan tighter. This was too much, too polished, too far from her world of shelters and subway tunnels. Her body screamed to run, but Ethan coughed again, the sound wet and weak, and she forced herself to move forward. Daniel opened the rear door and gestured. "Wait," he murmured, lifting a hand to call someone waiting inside. A man in a medical coat stepped out carrying a small bag, his breath steaming in the night. "This is Dr. Lewis," Daniel said, keeping his voice calm. "He will look at your son here before we go anywhere." Anna's knees nearly buckled with fear. Doctors meant questions, files, bureaucracy. But when Dr. Lewis knelt beside her in the snow and listened to Ethan's chest with his stethoscope, all she saw was a professional frown. "He is dangerously febrile," the doctor said, turning to Daniel. "Dehydrated, undernourished, lungs weak. He needs immediate care." Anna's heart clenched. Dr. Lewis must have read the panic in her eyes, because he added gently, "Not a hospital. We can treat him privately. I will ride with you." Her shoulders sagged in relief, mixed with shame. She nodded, too choked to speak. Daniel placed a supportive hand near her arm, not touching, only steadying her. "Come," he whispered. "Please." She slid into the car, clutching Ethan, and the warmth of the leather seats wrapped around her like a miracle. The doors shut out the storm, leaving only the hum of the heater and the doctor's quiet instructions as he administered fluids and wrapped Ethan in blankets from a medical kit. Anna sat frozen, watching every move her mind caught between disbelief and hope. Daniel sat opposite his tuxedo, damp from the snow, his eyes fixed not on his phone or the city lights, but on her child. He looked like a man fighting his own storm inside. Minutes passed, then Dr. Lewis looked up. "His fever is still high, but he is stable for now. We must keep him warm." Daniel exhaled a breath he had been holding since the tunnel. The car pulled away, gliding through deserted avenues toward Midtown. Anna pressed Ethan closer, her voice a whisper of thanks that caught in her throat. Daniel shook his head softly. "Do not thank me yet. Just keep him close." When the car slowed before a towering glass building with lights glowing against the storm, Anna's breath caught. Penthouse Daniel told her, gently anticipating her suspicion. "Just for tonight. You can leave tomorrow if you wish." The elevator ride felt endless, her reflection trembling in polished steel. Ethan bundled in her arms like fragile glass. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space she could not fathom. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the storm. The skyline glittered in the distance, and warmth radiated from soft golden lights. Anna staggered a step, overwhelmed. This could not be real. Daniel moved ahead, gesturing toward a wide couch near the fireplace. "Please sit." She lowered herself onto the cushions, feeling them swallow her in comfort she had not known for years. Ethan stirred weakly, his small fingers clutching the scarf still wrapped around him. Her throat tightened. She looked at Daniel standing nearby, unsure of her, unsure of himself. Romance detail bloomed quietly when he removed his cashmere overcoat and stepped close. He draped it gently around her shoulders, his voice low, almost apologetic. "At least tonight you do not have to be cold." Her breath-caught eyes stinging with tears she refused to shed. The fire crackled. Dr. Lewis excused himself to prepare medication in a guest room, leaving the three of them in fragile silence. Anna sat rigid, her mind screaming that this was a trap, yet her body sinking into warmth her bones had long forgotten. Daniel lingered by the fire, his hands outstretched toward the flames, his tuxedo damp, his expression unreadable. He did not press her with questions or demands. He only said softly, "He will be all right." Anna looked down at Ethan nestled against her. The child's breathing had steadied his cheeks, still flushed, but less frightening. She kissed his hair, her lips trembling. For the first time in months, the cold no longer ruled every part of her. Yet fear clung stubbornly, whispering that warmth always came before betrayal. She sat silently in the billionaire's home, clutching her son, listening to the storm batter the windows, and wondered if fate had finally shifted, or if this was only another cruel mirage. Anna barely slept that first night, even with Ethan breathing easier in her arms, and the fire humming softly in the hearth. Every sound in the penthouse set her nerves on edge, the hum of the heating system, the faint click of the elevator shaft, the quiet shuffle of Daniel's footsteps as he moved from one room to another. When dawn spilled pale light across the windows, she sat up quickly, blinking at the skyline spread beneath them, skyscrapers glittering in the sun. For a moment she thought she had dreamed the entire night. Then she looked down and saw Ethan curled against her, still wrapped in blankets far too fine for them, and reality returned with a sting. Daniel appeared from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one carefully on the table near her, keeping his distance. "You should try," he said quietly. "It helps after a long night." Anna shook her head, suspicion still carved deep into her bones. Nothing in her life had ever been free. She whispered sharply, "Why are you doing this? People like you do not see people like me." Daniel leaned against the back of a chair, his tuxedo replaced by a plain sweater and slacks. For the first time he looked less like a figure on a magazine cover and more like a man. "I could not walk away," he said simply. "I saw you, and I could not." Anna laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You think this makes you a savior. I am not your charity case." Her voice cracked, and she hugged Ethan tighter, her eyes burning. Daniel's gaze softened, but he did not flinch. "It is not pity," he said firmly. "You have survived more nights than I can imagine. That is not weakness. That is strength." Anna's breath hitched. Strength. No one had called her strong in years. They called her reckless, unfit, a burden. Hearing it now from a billionaire in a glass tower felt almost cruel. She stood quickly still, holding Ethan, though his weight dragged at her arms. "We will leave," she said. "Thank you for last night, but we will leave." Daniel stepped forward. A single pace, palms, lifted his voice urgent but steady. "Where will you go?" "Back to the subway. Back to a system that will not help you. He will not survive another week out there." Anna's throat closed. She knew he was right, but pride and fear tangled inside her. She spat the words anyway. "Better the streets I know than the cage I do not." Daniel shook his head. "You are not a prisoner here. Stay because it is safe. Stay because of him." He gestured toward Ethan, whose small hand twitched beneath the blanket. Anna faltered, her chest tight. Her son stirred and whispered weakly for water. The sound shattered her defenses more than anything Daniel had said. She sat back down heavily, tears she refused to show glistening in her eyes. Daniel moved quietly to the kitchen, returning with a glass, holding it out without stepping too close. Anna accepted it with trembling hands, tipping the cool water gently to her son's lips. Ethan drank slowly, then sank back against her chest, sighing softly. She pressed her lips to his forehead, relief flooding her. Daniel watched his jaw tight with something she could not read. Finally, he said quietly, "Then stay. Not for me, not for appearances. Stay for him." Anna's eyes met his, raw and sharp. "For him only," she whispered. Daniel nodded once, his gaze steady. "For him." The silence that followed was heavy, but different than the night before. It was no longer just fear and suspicion. It was the first fragile step across the vast distance between a homeless mother and a billionaire heir, a fragile truce carved out in the clash of their two worlds. The hours that followed settled into a rhythm Anna did not expect. Ethan was placed in a quiet guest room where Dr. Lewis checked on him periodically, leaving instructions for rest and hydration. Anna refused to leave her son's side at first, but as the day stretched into afternoon, she found herself drifting toward the kitchen where Daniel sat at a long marble counter reading the morning paper. He looked up when she entered, his eyes tired but gentle. "There is tea if you prefer it," he offered, sliding a mug toward her. She hesitated, then accepted the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. It had been weeks since anyone had handed her something so simple without demand or judgment. Ethan's fever eased slightly that evening, and for the first time in months, Anna allowed her body to relax against the couch while her son slept nearby. Daniel moved quietly in the background, turning down lights, adjusting the thermostat, never crowding her space. She noticed he kept a respectful distance, as though aware that one wrong step might send her fleeing. Later that night, she awoke to the soft rustle of paper. She rose silently, drawn by curiosity, and found Daniel sitting on the sofa in the dim light of a lamp, still in his sweater, reading financial reports. His face, usually so composed, was softened by exhaustion. The lines around his mouth seemed deeper, his eyes shadowed. He rubbed his forehead with one hand, unaware she was watching. Something stirred in her chest, a flicker of recognition that this man carried weight of his own, invisible yet heavy. She retreated quickly before he could notice her heart unsettled. The following morning, Daniel appeared with a small bundle of folded clothes. "They might not fit perfectly," he said, "but they are clean and warm." Anna accepted them wordlessly, slipping into the bathroom to change. The sweater was soft, the jeans snug but comfortable. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Clean hair, flushed cheeks, clothes without holes. It felt dangerous to see herself this way, as though hope could creep in where it had long been banished. When she returned, Ethan was awake, sipping broth from a spoon held carefully in her hand. Daniel lingered by the doorway, watching with a faint smile. "He looks better," Daniel said. Anna nodded but did not smile. "He will be better when we are gone," she answered, though her voice lacked conviction. Daniel walked closer, crouched to eye level with Ethan, and said gently, "You are strong, little man." Ethan blinked at him, his lips parting in a faint smile. Anna's chest tightened. That night, Daniel brought out files from his late mother's charity foundation. He explained quietly that it ran shelters across the city funded entirely by his family's wealth, but managed by volunteers. He looked at Anna carefully. "If you want work, there is a place in one of the shelters. Kitchen supplies simple duties. It is not charity. It is employment." Anna stared at the papers, suspicion gnawing. "Why?" she asked. "Finally, would you give me this?" Daniel's gaze did not waver. "Because you deserve more than survival," he answered. "Because he deserves more." He nodded toward Ethan, asleep again under blankets. Anna swallowed hard, emotions tangling in her chest. Part of her wanted to refuse to cling to pride, but another part saw the chance for stability she had dreamed of for her son. She said nothing, only nodded once. The following day she accompanied Daniel to the shelter. It was noisy, crowded, filled with the smell of soup and the shuffle of tired feet. But for the first time, she did not feel like an outsider. She was offered an apron, shown how to organize food in the storeroom, asked to help stir pots of stew. Her hands moved clumsily at first, then with purpose. She glanced across the room and saw Daniel speaking with volunteers, sleeves rolled up, laughter rare, but genuine. She felt something shift inside her again. That night, back in this penthouse, she tucked Ethan into bed and lingered in the library, a room lined with books she never imagined touching. Ethan's voice floated from the couch where he had been practicing a song, the same lullaby she had sung in the subway. She hummed softly, and soon Daniel's deep baritone joined unbidden weaving into their tune. 3 voices filled the quiet room, tentative but harmonious, and for one fleeting moment, Anna felt the impossible warmth of a family forming where there had once been only loneliness. The days that followed unfolded with a fragile steadiness Anna had almost forgotten could exist. Each morning she rose early, slipping into the clothes Daniel had provided, preparing breakfast for Ethan before walking with Daniel to the shelter. There she spent hours stocking shelves, chopping vegetables, and ladling soup into bowls, her body exhausted, but her spirit strangely lighter. In the evening she returned to the penthouse where Ethan waited, his cheeks gaining color, his laughter returning in small bursts. Trust did not come easily, but cracks began to show in the walls she had built around herself. One evening, as snow tapped softly against the window panes, Anna sat across from Daniel in the dim light of the library. Ethan had fallen asleep curled up with a blanket, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, eyes staring at the fire, but clearly lost elsewhere. She studied him for a long moment before asking quietly, "Why are you really doing this?" For a moment he did not answer. Then he sighed, setting the glass aside. "Because once someone saved me," he said. "I was not much older than your son when my mother died. I remember her singing to me in the hospital, holding my hand until she could not anymore. My father never came. After she was gone, I was raised in a house full of servants and silence. All the money in the world could not fill the emptiness." Anna listened, her heart tightening. She had never considered that loneliness could live inside someone with so much power. Daniel continued, "My father taught me numbers, profits, acquisitions. He never taught me people. He told me compassion was weakness. I tried to believe him, but last week when I watched men congratulate themselves on raising millions for charity while never looking into the eyes of those they claimed to help, I felt sick. Then I heard you singing in that tunnel. I could not ignore it." His voice faltered, eyes shining with something raw. Anna looked away, struggling to absorb his words. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I once thought my life would be different too. I was studying art. Painting was the only thing that made me feel alive. I dreamed of opening a studio, maybe teaching children. Then I fell in love with a man who promised me the world. We married quickly, too quickly, and within a year he was gone, leaving me with debts and a child." She swallowed, hard memories slicing through her. "I tried to manage. I worked 3 jobs, skipped meals to feed Ethan, begged for extensions on rent. But debts piled higher than my hope. One night we were locked out, and from then on, the streets became our home." Her voice cracked on the last word, shame and fury warring inside her. Daniel leaned forward, his expression fierce but tender. "You kept him alive," he said firmly. "That is not failure. That is strength." Anna blinked hard against tears. She wanted to believe, but the weight of years crushed her shoulders. "I have nothing to offer him," she whispered. "No future, no home." Daniel's eyes burned into hers. "You have everything," he said. "You are his mother. That is more than enough." The fire popped softly, filling the silence between them. Ethan stirred in his sleep, murmuring a fragment of the lullaby. Anna smiled faintly, brushing his hair back. She began to hum again, the melody gentle, filling the library with warmth. To her surprise, Daniel's voice joined deep and steady, weaving seamlessly into hers. Ethan's small voice followed, weak but sweet, and the 3 of them sang together, tentative yet whole. For a brief moment, Anna felt as if the world outside did not exist, as if the scars of the past could be soothed by the harmony of voices in the firelight. When the song ended, Daniel's gaze lingered on her, unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Anna looked away quickly, heart racing. She told herself it was just gratitude, just exhaustion. Yet deep down, she felt the fragile spark of something she had long buried, the possibility of love. The fragile peace that had begun to grow around them did not last. It was a Thursday morning when the first photographs appeared online. grainy shots taken by a paparazzo who had followed Daniel from the shelter back to his penthouse. The images showed Anna carrying a grocery bag in one hand and holding Ethan's mittened fingers in the other as they stepped through the gleaming lobby doors. Within hours, gossip websites blared with headlines. "Billionaire's secret homeless mistress," one site shouted. Another plastered a split screen of Daniel in his tuxedo beside a blurry image of Anna in borrowed jeans with the caption, "From the streets to the sheets." By noon, the story had reached national news commentators speculating about the mysterious woman living in the Whitmore Tower. Anna discovered the storm when she arrived at the shelter. Volunteers whispered, their eyes flicking toward her. A man with a smartphone smirked openly as he snapped a picture. She flushed crimson, clutching Ethan close, her stomach churning with shame. That evening, when she returned to the penthouse, reporters swarmed outside their cameras, flashing in the snow, shouting questions. "How long have you been living with him? Are you pregnant with the billionaire's child? Did you meet him on the streets?" Anna's throat closed, panic seizing her. Daniel appeared suddenly, stepping between her and the crowd, his jaw hard. "Enough," he barked, ushering her and Ethan through the doors. Inside the elevator, Anna's hands shook violently. "They will ruin us," she whispered. Daniel turned, his expression fierce. "They will not touch you or him. I will make sure of it." But the storm only intensified. Talk shows debated whether Daniel had lost his mind. Financial analysts questioned if the scandal would hurt his company. The board of directors summoned him to an emergency meeting. His father confronted him in the boardroom, voice thundering. "She will destroy everything we built." Daniel stood tall, his fists clenched. "She saved me," he said quietly. "You just cannot see it." The elder Whitmore sneered. "Sentiment is weakness. She is weakness." Daniel walked out, his heart pounding, but doubt gnawed at him. At the penthouse, Anna felt the weight of the public gaze pressing against the glass windows. She scrolled through her phone at night, reading cruel comments. Gold digger, fraud, unfit mother. Tears burned her eyes, but she hid them from Ethan, who sensed the tension regardless. One afternoon, he returned from the shelter in tears. "The kids called me a beggar's son," he sobbed. Anna held him tight, her own heart breaking. She turned to Daniel, her voice raw. "This is destroying him." Daniel cupped her shoulders, eyes blazing. "I will protect him. I will protect you both." But Anna shook her head, fear choking her. "You cannot fight the whole world." She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Ethan's soft breathing, Daniel's quiet footsteps pacing down the hall. The warmth of the penthouse no longer comforted her. It felt like a spotlight exposing every flaw, every scar. She thought of the subway tunnel of anonymity in the dark, and a twisted part of her longed for it again. When the weekend arrived, another wave of headlines hit. Anonymous sources claimed Anna was manipulating Daniel for money. One tabloid splashed her old eviction notice across the front page. Photographers camped outside day and night. Anna's resolve cracked. She packed a small bag in silence while Ethan slept, tears streaking down her face. Daniel found her at the door, eyes wide with alarm. "Where are you going?" She swallowed hard. "Away. Before I ruin you." His chest tightened, anger and desperation colliding. "Do you really think I care what they say?" She shook her head. "You should. Your empire, your family name. You have everything to lose." He stepped closer, voice low and urgent. "Then let me lose it. Let me choose you." She flinched, torn between wanting to believe and fearing the consequences. Finally, she whispered, "I cannot let Ethan suffer for this." She kissed her son's forehead, whispered a promise of love, and slipped out before dawn, leaving Daniel standing in the cold glow of the city lights, his heart breaking under the weight of a scandal that had only just begun. The city felt colder without the shelter of Daniel's walls, though spring was only weeks away. Anna found a temporary bed at an overcrowded women's shelter in Queens, a place where thin mattresses lined the floor and meals were served from dented trays. She held Ethan close each night, whispering lullabies to drown out the arguments of strangers in the next cot. She told herself she had done the right thing, that she had protected Daniel from ruin and her son from ridicule, yet every hour without his warmth carved a hollow deeper inside her chest. Ethan grew quieter, sensing her unrest. his eyes searching for the man who had called him strong. "Mama, where is he?" the boy asked one morning, his small voice trembling. Anna kissed his hair and lied. "He is busy, sweetheart. Too busy." But the lie tasted bitter, and her heart ached at the disappointment clouding his face. Across town, Daniel sat in his office high above the city, staring at reports he could not read. The board had demanded his focus, but their voices blurred together, meaningless. Every corner of the penthouse reminded him of her, the blanket she had folded neatly, the faint sound of music she had once hummed with Ethan in the library. He poured whiskey late at night, but left it untouched, staring instead at the snow melting along the window pane. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. His father's words echoed endlessly: weakness, liability, ruin, but they no longer carried weight. What haunted him was Anna's voice the night she left the tremor, when she whispered she could not let Ethan suffer. He clenched his fists, knowing he would trade every building and fortune to erase that fear. At the shelter, Anna searched for work, scrubbing floors, mending clothes, doing anything to pay for medicine Ethan needed. She ignored the whispers of other women who recognized her face from tabloids, turning her shame into armor. But each time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel standing in the glow of city lights, his voice rough with desperation. "Then let me lose it. Let me choose you." The memory burned like a secret flame she could not extinguish. Weeks passed heavy with silence. Daniel avoided the parties and galas that once defined him, instead spending nights walking aimlessly through the city's streets, searching without knowing what he sought. He found himself passing subway tunnels, looking down into the shadows, as if he might see her again, where it had all begun. His chest ached with longing and regret. In Queens, Anna sat on a bench outside the shelter, Ethan asleep against her lap. She gazed at the skyline, the tallest tower etched with the Whitmore name gleaming against the dusk. Her throat tightened. She told herself she had left to save him, yet in the quiet hours she admitted the truth she had left because she was afraid. Afraid of happiness, of trust, of losing everything again. Love was a risk she had not dared take. But the memory of Daniel's hand covering hers, his voice steady as he told her she was strong, haunted her as much as the storm ever had. She wiped a tear quickly before it could fall on Ethan's cheek and whispered, "To the night I am sorry." In his office, Daniel whispered the same words to the empty air, unaware that across the city the woman he loved was breaking in silence, just as he was. It happened on a damp evening when the city smelled of rain and exhaust. The shelter had run out of supplies, and Anna had skipped dinner so Ethan could have her portion of soup. She watched him eat slowly, his hands trembling, and told herself he was only tired. But as night fell, his skin grew clammy, his lips pale, and a hollow rattle echoed in his chest with every breath. Panic clawed at her. She pressed a hand to his forehead and felt heat radiating like fire. Ethan moaned softly, his body limp against her arm. Anna shouted for help, and volunteers rushed to gather around, but their tools were meager, only aspirin and damp cloths. Someone dialed for an ambulance, but the line crackled with delays. Overcrowded hospitals, long waits. Anna's vision blurred with terror. She clutched Ethan to her chest and whispered frantically, "Stay with me, my love, please stay." His small body jerked in a sudden spasm, and she screamed, drawing startled gasps. They placed him on a thin cot, his breath shallow and erratic, and Anna felt the walls of the shelter closing in. Just then, the doors burst open, and Daniel appeared soaked from the rain, his eyes wild. He had been searching for days, driven by restless nights and unanswered questions, and now he stood frozen at the sight of Ethan convulsing on the bed. Anna's eyes widened in disbelief. "You?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel strode forward, ignoring the protests of staff. He dropped to his knees beside the boy, pulling a small case from his coat. "I brought Dr. Lewis," he said breathlessly. The physician hurried in equipment already in hand. Anna's instincts flared, but desperation silenced them. She clutched Daniel's arm, her voice raw. "Do not let them take him." Daniel met her gaze firmly. "No hospitals, only us. Trust me." Dr. Lewis pressed an oxygen mask gently over Ethan's face, attaching monitors that beeped with alarming irregularity. "His pulse is weak, dangerously low," he muttered. "We need to stabilize him now." Anna sobbed, rocking forward, her hands trembling over her son's chest. Daniel's hand covered hers, steady and warm, grounding her in the chaos. "I will not let you face this alone," he whispered. "Come with me, Anna. Let me help him." She searched his eyes, saw no pity there, only fierce determination. Ethan's body arched once more, then sagged, his tiny voice barely audible. "Mama," Anna broke. Her tears fell hot onto his cheek, mixing with the condensation of the mask. She looked back at Daniel, her defenses gone. "Save him," she pleaded. "Save my boy." Daniel nodded sharply. Dr. Lewis administered an injection, the hiss of medication filling the room. For a moment, time froze. Then Ethan's chest lifted with a steadier breath, his small hand twitching. Relief thundered through Anna, her body collapsing against Daniel's shoulder. He held her tightly, his cheek pressed to her hair, whispering again and again, "I will not let you go. Come with me." The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside that fragile shelter, Anna finally surrendered. She nodded against his chest, tears soaking his shirt, her voice broken, but sure. "Yes, please. Yes!" Ethan stirred again, his eyes flickering open, faint but alive, and Anna kissed his forehead with trembling lips. Daniel's hand lingered over them both, his face fierce with resolve. In that moment, the choice was no longer about wealth or scandal or pride. It was about love, about saving what mattered most. And for the first time, Anna allowed herself to believe that perhaps she and her son were no longer alone. The following morning dawned gray and heavy, but inside Daniel's penthouse, the air carried a fragile warmth. Ethan lay tucked in blankets on the wide couch, his chest rising and falling with a steadiness that felt like a miracle. Anna sat beside him, her hand resting on his small arm, her eyes swollen from a night of tears, yet glimmering with relief. Daniel stood near the window, speaking quietly into his phone, his tone clipped and determined. When he ended the call, he turned his gaze steady. "I have called a press conference for tonight. They will hear the truth from me, not from tabloids." Anna's stomach clenched. Her instinct was to run to avoid the eyes of the world, but Daniel's voice was firm. "They will destroy you if we stay silent. I will not allow it." That evening, cameras flashed outside the glass tower as reporters filled the lobby. Daniel appeared first immaculately dressed in a dark suit, his expression hard but calm. Beside him stood Anna, her hand trembling in his until he gave it a reassuring squeeze. Ethan remained upstairs under Dr. Lewis's watchful care. The microphones crackled. Daniel faced the sea of lights and voices. "You have questions," he began, his voice resonant. "The woman you have photographed is not a mistress, not a scandal, not a liability. She is the woman I love." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but he pressed on. "Yes, she was homeless. Yes, she has suffered. And yes, she is the strongest person I have ever known. She saved her son through courage and sacrifice when the world turned its back. If you wish to judge me for not seeing her sooner." The words struck like thunder. Reporters shouted, but Daniel continued, his jaw set. "Wealth means nothing if it blinds us to humanity. I will not be ashamed of her. I will not hide her. She and her son are my family now." Anna's knees wavered, emotion flooding her. She had expected condemnation, but instead a hush fell over the room. Then slowly, a ripple of applause began, not from the press, but from employees, volunteers from the shelter who had been invited to stand witness. Their clapping grew louder, echoing in the lobby. Headlines that night read, "Billionaire defends love against scandal and modern Cinderella story melts New York." Public opinion shifted, sympathy blooming where scorn had been. The board of directors grumbled, but as company stocks stabilized under Daniel's firm leadership, they had no choice but to relent. Even his father, silent at first, offered a grudging nod weeks later, though no apology ever came. What mattered more was Ethan's recovery. Days passed and his laughter returned, filling the penthouse with a sound that no orchestra could match. One evening, he ran to Daniel's arms outstretched and called out the word that changed everything. "Dad." Daniel froze, his heart seizing. Then he knelt and embraced the boy tightly, tears pricking his eyes. Anna watched her throat aching, her heart swelling with a love she could no longer deny. Weeks later, the three of them stood together at the opening of a new shelter funded by Daniel's foundation. Cameras clicked, but this time Anna held her head high. She wore a simple dress, her hand clasped with Daniel's, Ethan perched proudly between them. Reporters asked questions, but the story had already been written in the faces of those they helped. The billionaire and the homeless mother had chosen not just each other, but a mission larger than themselves. That night back at the penthouse, Anna cooked a modest meal in the sleek kitchen, insisting on doing it herself. Daniel set the table while Ethan folded napkins with serious concentration. When they sat down together, the food was humble, nothing like the lavish banquets Daniel was used to, but the warmth in the room was richer than any gala. Anna looked around the table at her son, smiling at the man beside her pouring water instead of wine, and felt tears prick her eyes. For years, she had survived on scraps of hope, afraid to dream. Now she realized she was not dreaming. She was home. Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand in his. No speeches, no audience, just his quiet voice saying, "You saved me as much as I saved you." She squeezed his hand, her heart swelling. Together they ate, laughed softly, and listened to Ethan chatter about schoolwork and stories. Outside the city pulsed with endless noise, but within those walls a family had been born, not by blood or wealth, but by choice. And as the fire crackled and the storm clouds parted, Anna knew that this love forged in despair and tested by the world was the second chance she had prayed for all along.